You're watching WION. This is Race to Power and I'm Shreya Upadhyay. On the show today, we get you more from Brussels, where the farmers' protest has delayed the signing of the Mercosur deal. The agri-sector is particularly concerned about survival amid fears of South American products taking over markets. More about it in a bit. We also get you voices from Bangladesh and India on the volatile situation unfolding under the Yunus-led regime. Less than 24 hours after student leader Usman Hadi's death, radical groups continued their protests and anti-India slogans. Decoding this entire situation on Race to Power. Let's begin. Let's start with Brussels. The farmers' protest in Brussels has compelled European Union to delay the signing of the Mercosur deal. The announcement came a few hours ago when the EU Commission President announced a breakthrough in discussions at the summit.
This evening we have achieved a breakthrough to pave the way for a successful completion of the Mercosur agreement in January. We need a few extra weeks to address some issues with member states, and we have reached out to our Mercosur partners and agreed to postpone slightly the signature.
Now, despite von der Leyen's positive reinforcement of the deal in January, France still remains uncertain of its position. While answering a media query, Macron said that it was too soon to say if the deal will be signed next month.
C'est trop tôt pour vous le dire.
It's too soon to say, I don't know. Many people told us, when we said several months ago that safeguard clauses and mirror clauses were needed, that it would be possible. I myself said a few weeks ago that I was positive but cautious, and we were seeing progress. Then we didn't move fast enough. So what matters to me is the substance. What matters to me is that we keep our commitments.
Now, amid this delay and the ongoing discussion between EU member states, farmers once again took to the streets in the Belgian capital. The protest took a violent turn when demonstrators lit fires outside the parliament building. Farmers were also seen clashing with the police while demonstrating against a trade deal with South American bloc Mercosur for the agriculture sector. Remember, the key concern is survival amid a potential influx of imports from South American nations.
We are already in real distress, so we cannot accept these betrayals by the European Union that continue and persist. It is no longer acceptable.
And for more on this, let me go across to William Danslow. He's joining us on the phone line from Brussels to help us get an understanding of what exactly is happening. William, take us through the latest of what's happening. This is a concerning situation. The farmers' protest has been ongoing for a long time. Their concerns are legitimate, but what's the government and the EU saying?
Absolutely. Well, this is an essential trade deal, free trade agreement between Mercosur and the European Union that would make it the largest type of agreement of its kind anywhere in the world. It's been in the works for roughly 25 years. It seems like at the very least we'll have to wait a few weeks more. Conceivably, Ursula von der Leyen, Commission President, could be going to South America to sign it as early as January 12th if things go as planned. But there are real concerns, as we heard there in those clips, as well as from European leaders. Now, when it comes to these concerns, well, the farming community, real concerns that essentially there's a mismatch when it comes to regulations in South America versus the regulations, the barriers that need to be followed here, and the regulations that are required. So they're worried about cheap, less regulated goods essentially flooding the European market. Those in favour of this deal say that there will be safeguards to ensure that European growers are protected. So all eyes on whether these pledges for safeguards will be enough to appease, most notably Italy, that are increasingly seen as kingmakers in this deal. We know that Italian leader Giorgia Meloni had a conversation on Thursday with her Brazilian counterpart to discuss this plan. So very interesting to see exactly how Rome's stance proceeds in the coming weeks.
All right, William, thanks very much for joining us at the moment, taking us through the latest. We'll keep coming back to you for more from Brussels. At the moment, of course, the situation remains concerning. All right, let's shift our focus now to Bangladesh. Remember, just 2 months before elections in Bangladesh, the country is on edge once again. A youth leader's assassination has triggered widespread unrest in the country. Sharif Osman Hadi, the student leader involved in the 2024 uprising that ousted Sheikh Hasina, was shot last week. He was receiving medical treatment in Singapore before succumbing to his injuries on Thursday night. As of this morning, calm returned to several parts of the country. However, protesters continued to march in central Dhaka's Shahbag, carrying flags and demanding justice for the slain leader.
We are here to demand justice for Hadi. We demand that Hadi's killers be brought to justice and given the maximum punishment.
Now, shortly after Hadi's death, the situation in Bangladesh's capital spiraled. Protesters vandalized the partially demolished house of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. They were seen attempting to tear down the remaining portion of the house and setting fire to a poster of the ousted Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina. This following a night of unrest. Several buildings in the capital, including those housing the country's 2 leading newspapers, were set on fire. The first attack came on Pratham Alo, where the crowd had gone chanting slogans. The crowd vandalized the office before setting it on fire around midnight. They then vandalized the ground and first floors of the Daily Star, another leading newspaper, before putting it ablaze at about 12:30 a.m. The blaze quickly engulfed the 2 floors, sending a huge column of smoke into the air. The fire service could not reach the building for some time because a crowd blocked their way. The entire night shift fled to the roof to save their lives, pleading for help through phone calls and social media posts. Firefighters eventually reached the site and brought the fire under control at about 2 a.m. However, the journalists could not be brought out immediately because the crowd stormed the building after the fire was extinguished. The interim government, meanwhile, in a statement, urged citizens to resist all forms of mob violence committed by who he referred to as fringe elements. The government strongly condemned all acts of violence, intimidation, arson, and destruction of properties, pointing out that it is a critical moment in the country's history with elections planned. The interim administration under Mohammad Yunus, in a message to the citizens, said, "We cannot and must not allow it to be derailed by those," it said, "thrive on chaos and reject peace." But with the past week of unrest, demonstrations and violence in Bangladesh, they've raised some very serious questions on the interim administration in power. Is control slipping out of Yunus's hands? Or is there more to this chaos than meets the eye? All right, to understand what is happening in Bangladesh this close to elections, we spoke with former and current leaders of the country, Mohibul Hasan, former education minister during Hasina's regime, and a prominent student leader, Saddam Hussein. In fact, both have connected the persisting chaos to Pakistan's interference. Take a listen.
Not just orchestrated, but the legal regime there are being assisted by officials of Pakistan intelligence. It is public record. It's not something I'm making up. Generals from Pakistan Army had been visiting Bangladesh in the last 15 months, almost every month, we've seen Lashkar-e-Taiba LET's head claiming that they have sent their operatives to Bangladesh to train the Mujahideen, in their words. And Maulana Fazlur Rahman has been given a state protocol when he went to Bangladesh.
Overthrowing of a constitutional and democratic government. The agitation and brutal violence protest was actually done by the Jamaat Islam, Hizbut Tahrir, and other Islamic military political parties, legal or illegal. And after 5 August, the government is actually run by these groups. They are doing whatever they want. They are trying to have Sharia law. They are attacking women's freedom. They are attacking to the minorities. So, not only the evil nexus between Jamaat Islam and the current illegal regime, there is also connection with the Pakistan-backed terrorist organizations, ISI-backed terrorist organizations. They are moving freely in Bangladesh. They are training the Islamic militant groups. So, what is happening right now, Bangladesh, is actually a meticulous plan of the current government.
All right, you heard the Bangladeshi perspective. Let's get you an Indian perspective as well. Let me go across to Ambassador Anil Trigunayath, former Indian diplomat and distinguished fellow VIF. Remember, he has served in the Indian missions in Bangladesh, Mongolia, US, Russia, among other countries. He joins us on the broadcast tonight. Ambassador Trigunayath, welcome to the show. Can I first understand from you what you make of this situation? These are anti-India slogans that are being carried out in Bangladesh. These are very concerning times, not just because the India-Bangladesh ties are impacted, but the country itself is preparing for elections in February next year.
Well, unfortunately, what is happening in Bangladesh is extremely concerning for India and should be concerning for the rest of the world. Because this is something that is nearer to the democratic transition process that is expected to take place. That is also in certain ways very flawed, because several political parties, including the Awami League, have not been allowed to participate in the election. So in that lies the seeds of discontent. And that's what you will be seeing going forward. The smooth transition would be very, very difficult in that sense. At the same time, what we are looking at today, if you remember, this Osman Hadi was against all established political parties. He wanted a new kind of system, a new kind of political party, because he had no faith in any of them. So anybody could have been involved in his killing. But at the same time, they somehow, as a convenient excuse and distraction, and possibly under the guidance of the ISI and others, the Bangladesh government of the day, transitional government, has started, pointing fingers at India, and that has fanned more trouble. That's against India, and that's why we are looking at the attacks on the Indian High Commission and the threat perceptions on the assets that India has there. Now, that is something absolutely uncalled for and unjustified. India is the only country that has continued to help Bangladeshis, not a government. We work with the government of the day, whichever is there, but India has only helped the Bangladeshi people in their journey towards development, all through its neighborhood first policy. But somehow India is being made out to be a punching bag, and whoever wishes comes up. And we have seen that there are these radical elements, whether it's from Jamaat Islami or other elements that some of your previous speakers talked about, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Pakistani ISI, and other radical and extremist groups that are operating currently in a free hand in Bangladesh. And for them, stopping them, let alone stopping them, they have been actually very fervently welcomed by the current regime. So that casts aspersions on their conduct and their intentions.
Ambassador Trigunayath, very rightly said. And what's interesting is that when I spoke with Saddam Hussein, the student leader, he said that most Bangladeshis are not against India. It is these radical Islamist groups who are making this a political narrative and pushing the anti-India sentiment on the streets. But as far as most Bangladeshis are concerned, what do you think? What would they want in terms of their elected members? Because obviously we know Muhammad Yunus is somebody who was not elected democratically through elections. And I also want you to talk to us briefly about the American role, because Yunus is somebody who thanked Bill Clinton and Joe Biden earlier when he took power of bringing in this regime change in Bangladesh.
Well, I mean, there are definitely indications that the Americans were not happy with Sheikh Hasina for various reasons, including the base that they wanted there. Plus, she was trying to be friendly with both India and China and balancing it rather well. And she was becoming independent. And as you know, for the big powers, independent foreign policy is not something that they like. So they naturally work towards that. Besides, Bangladesh has its own major problems. There is a youth discontent which is there. Sheikh Hasina herself had become somewhat autocratic in the sense and was unable to connect with the masses. So this was just they needed simply a trigger. And the Americans are great at that. They would have worked on it. There are indications that nobody can say that today, but this is how one comes to know their own government. The US, many of the leaders have said that at least 60 regime changes have been brought about by their agencies. So that is very much there. But India and Bangladesh have been very close. People in Bangladesh do understand that the one country that has stood with them from their independence up to till today is India, and that is selflessly has done. Our only expectation from Bangladesh and all our neighbor countries has been that they would not allow their land or their territory to be used against India's security concerns. Precisely, that's what Mr. Yunus's government has done. In fact, it has not been able to deliver since the 1 year almost since the time that this revolution, so-called revolution, took place. Well, that is for the people of Bangladesh to decide what kind of a government they want, what kind of people they want. But at the same time, just to distract them, because they have not been able to deliver in any which way, they obviously try to find India into a punching bag. India wants, and what Prime Minister Modi, what Indian government has said is that we want elections to be there. We want well for Bangladesh. And till today, despite all the problems, India has continued to assist Bangladeshis,
Right.
despite the kind of statements coming from there.
So despite being a good friend with Bangladesh, clearly these are challenging times in the India-Bangladesh ties. We'll leave it there. Ambassador Anil Trigunaya, thank you very much for joining us on WION and sharing your perspective. Of course, viewers, we will keep getting you more from Bangladesh. Right now, let's move on to the United States of America. Remember, today is a big day in United States politics. We're just hours away from the release of the Epstein files, and it remains to be seen just how much the U.S. Justice Department will share. Meanwhile, remember, Trump supporters have rallied behind him, saying that the U.S. president is a family man with values.
Trump, I don't know. I mean, they do say he's close to people, but I don't know. I like to believe, that he's a family man and he holds certain values, and so that's what I'm shooting for. So I doubt he will be, though.
A day earlier, congressional Democrats released dozens of new images from the estate of the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The 68 newly released photographs include redacted passports and identification cards from multiple countries, including Russia, Ukraine, Morocco, Italy, South Africa, the Czech Republic, and Lithuania. A number of faces in these images are obscured to protect identities. Other photographs include two images showing public intellectual Noam Chomsky seated with Epstein on what appears to be an aircraft. There are also pictures of Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates posing beside a woman whose face has been blurred. Former Trump strategist Steve Bannon also features in the newly released batch of photos. Now, Democrats say that the images do not depict unlawful conduct by the people shown, but are meant to provide transparency into Epstein's contacts and activities. Among the most disturbing images, however, are close-ups of text from Vladimir Nabokov's novel, Lolita, handwritten across a woman's body. There's also a screenshot of a late-night text exchange appearing to discuss sending young women to someone identified only as J for $1,000 each. Democrats say they are continuing to analyze thousands of photos described as both graphic and mundane. All right, our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us live from New York. Let me understand from her what this means from the Trump administration. Susan, you and I discuss this daily. These are photographs that are almost every second day released by the Democrats of Epstein files. As far as the Trump administration is concerned and the Republican Party in general is concerned, how are they reacting to it, considering the fact that the timing of the release of these photographs is extremely important ahead of the midterms?
It is important, the release of these photographs. However, not just Trump supporters, but a number of Jeffrey Epstein victims are now criticizing the Democrats because they say that they're providing these images to the public without giving any context on the one hand. And on the second hand, they think that it's more politically motivated as opposed to trying to bring to justice the perpetrators of these crimes, not just Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, but those powerful individuals who are involved. Remember, the Democrats have about 95,000 photos in their possession, and they're releasing these without any explanation and any context. Nonetheless, the Trump administration is now on deadline with each passing hour. The Justice Department, after President Trump signed into law that it has to release these by today, which is Friday, and it has to release it in a public manner on a portal of some sort where the public and everyone else can go in and try to, find out what is going on the one hand, and also be able to search for it to be a searchable engine as well. We're waiting on the Justice Department for that. However, many are wondering whether or not it'll be redacted heavily, volumes of it, because some parts of it is an ongoing investigation, and also because Ghislaine Maxwell just recently has requested that charges be dropped against her. But again, the skepticism is, will the Justice Department and the DOJ under the Trump administration use these investigations as an excuse to voluminously redact the material that it wants to bring out to the public. So a lot of questions still remain. A lot of skepticism remains on what we're going to get today. But nonetheless, yes, today is a big day, and today is that day.
Absolutely, Susan, and all eyes are on whom the Justice Department actually delivers justice to. But thanks very much, Susan Tehrani, for joining us and getting us the latest from United States of America. All right. Moving on, Bulgaria witnessed fresh protests in its capital and other major cities with renewed demands for fair elections in the country. Since 2021, Bulgaria has conducted 7 snap elections, but anger on the streets continues to persist. Take a look.
We strongly hope for change. That's why we're all here. Because we're infinitely tired of things staying the same. Everything happens through lies, deceit, and corruption. Enough is enough, and people are ready to stand up for their rights by any means necessary.
All right, with that, it's a wrap on Race to Power, but news and updates will continue on WION. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Bye-bye.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS Centenary Year, Kesariya at 100.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled